Hello, hello, hello. How's everybody doing? Hope everybody's having an awesome week and happy Mother's Day to everybody. So what's going on? What's going on? What is going on? So 10th of May 2015, not making any trade calls or recommendations because you and only you're responsible for the trades you may decide to take, and the fact you're in here means you're ready to understand you accept all the disclaimers on the blog, understanding that we're just performing some technical analysis in a learning context for educational purposes only. So it's going to be a fairly busy week, fairly constant data flow, not only from basically Europe, UK, US, Australia, China. So it'll be a decent week. So again, I'm not going to go through the data calendar in detail this week. What I wanted to do is just focus on Aussie and Kiwi, right? Just to look at those two charts. What I'm going to try and do here, I'm going to try and move back to a more regular, I don't know, maybe once a month live webinar on Sundays when we go through every single pair under the sun, or whoever wants to ask, we'll just go through whatever anybody wants to look. And the other ones, I'll just try and look at some opportunities here and there, or some charts. So first things first, what's going on Aussie? Well, as we see it here, I just brought these back because a lot of people tend to like these charts. So basically, it just helps you have a better understanding. So if you look at it from a monthly, right, what's going on? Clearly, we've had a very aggressive move down, and here it looks like price, even though in a fairly sloppy way, is trying to base at this 200. So basically, this is the 100 moving average. This is the 200 on a monthly here. So it looks like price is trying to base. So all things being equal, right, as long as we can't make it back below that moving average and try and take a stab at lows, this could be a bit of a messy bottoming process, right? And I think it would make sense to say that here. You know, as long as we keep on closing on a monthly basis above that moving average, it looks like it's trying to hold a bit of a bid tone, trying to move a bit higher, right? If you look at it on the weekly also, right? So if you're looking at that same kind of structure, that same kind of base, you know, here what we would say is, as long as these lows hold, right? As long as these lows hold, it would be healthy, right, in a healthy market to see the market try and take a stab right back up into this zone, right? Whether it's the 100 or the 200, that's still too early to tell. But what we're saying is just a healthy move would look for price to try and move back up here. Now, what's interesting is that on its way back up there, it will have to deal with a very interesting support that should act as resistance here. So, you know, the level I would be looking at here is for some kind of a move back into those 86, 86.40s, right? Now, having said that, we can move on to the daily, etc. Now, keep in mind that with both these pairs, both of the central banks have been trying to talk these down as much as they can. So the general feel is that, you know, every time they get bid, something comes out, the central banks talks them down, and they've done a fairly good job at doing that, right? The only thing I would like to draw your attention to here on Aussie, I think that it could start to catch the market a bit off guard, and we could start to see a bit of that healthy retracement, right? And we had this happen in the last two rate decisions, right? So what happened is the market tried to take a stab lower, clipped a lot of weak longs into the rate decisions, and then bam, reversed higher. And once it reversed higher, it tended not to look back, okay? So here what's happening, this is a daily, this is more of a tactical chart we've been looking at for trading, but you see what's happening here. Even if basically pressure is still on, and we've talked about this 80 as being the big Momo line, right? Since we broke it here, this was a very key zone, right? And we said once we broke, this was the key level, and we came into this big chop zone, right? We said as long as we stay in this range, we consider this a lot of range trading, more of a range trading opportunities with the possibility of some kind of complex or messy bottom, whatever you want to call it here, right? And once we put in this bottom, right, we said again, now we expect to see a move back into the 80. This moved all the way right back into that 80. And here we had a fairly, you know, negative, that's the best way to describe it, really negative close here. Now, I did not trade this to the short side. I mean, all things being equal, it's a nice short opportunity, fairly tight play. It just ended up closing above the 80. I tend to be fairly, you know, fairly disciplined with these. I wanted this to close below the 80 to get short, so I didn't get short. But anyways, basically we moved back down, caught a bid in this choppy zone on the rate decision, and bam, we're back up in the 80s getting it sold. But you see that broadly speaking, what's happening, even though the sellers are still here, we keep on making these higher lows, and it looks like it's really, you know, even though the sell-offs are very aggressive, and there's a, you know, a perfect excuse to get traction to the downside after breaking these lows. Bam, very aggressive move here. Perfect excuse to get traction to the downside. Nothing, right? And then these dips tend to be, even though this one's a bit more aggressive, you know, it doesn't get any traction. So it's a messy chart, but I just don't think it's such a clear-cut short here. And I think we could see, you know, heads up for the data, but we could see a bit of a surprise. The way I'm looking at this is, as long as we don't get a daily close back above the 80 level, you'd still have to expect pressure on. But again, as much as I was interested in trying to get short here on this this move or this move on the lower high, if we start to break back here, it could start to take off, it could easily start to squeeze. So don't be surprised if you start to see some squeeze action if we get back above there. You know, you'll have this whole area right here, and you know, 82, 83s, which is ahead of those 84, 86 zones to the upside, but clearly a lot of choppy action. And again, I don't think there's an awful lot of edge trying to trade these tight inside the ranges. But again, it does look like it, and again, it doesn't have to be a move higher to go back to all-time highs, right? It could just be a healthy correction inside what overall is still a fairly negative trend, right? It could still just be a little healthy correction for a move back up and then setting up the next move down, okay? So similar kind of action on Kiwi, where we're moving back up. A lot of people talking about this double top, which seems to, you know, be materializing, not being materializing. You know, it's been very, very choppy also, right? We had this whole series of a failure right here, but then we kept on getting all these higher lows here and still pressing higher. So another very choppy chart, you know, most likely not helped by the fact that the central banks are on the wires job bonding this left, right, and center. But basically what's happening here, you know, there is this double top here. We've moved back down. And what looked to be a very, very aggressive break of that 100, starting to get everybody excited for the continuation all the way back down for a much bigger move down on this double top, you know, it didn't really materialize, and it's still looking very, very whippy around this zone, right? You see how the market is still looking for direction here, and despite, you know, everything the RBNZ has done to talk it down, globally speaking, it's still holding a fairly decent bid, right? Again, I would suspect if at the end of this month we close back below here, then it'll probably start to try and get more traction to move back into these lows. But if we start to stabilize here, similar to Aussie, we could start to see a little bid tone coming back here, a bit more squeezy action. And again, here, very, very choppy action in mid-range, not an awful lot of edge. But again, I would not be surprised to see this start to take some stops out if it gets some traction to the upside and quickly move back into this whole 80 zone, 81 area if it gets some traction, okay? So, and back on the daily again, very, very choppy in this range. The chart we've been focused on here, and if you look at it here on the daily, is again, you know, we've been talking about these 76s being the really key zone. And I would suspect that the way this is trading, you'll probably get all the shorts will be more than happy to try and smack this back down at the 76. And that's still a level that I'm looking for as a big, big, big pivotal zone. Now, when it was hovering here, we said, you know, don't be fooled by this action. You know, it could still be, this could easily be a false break of this trend line. We're not huge fans of trend lines, so you have to respect this whole action here, you know, and this negative close right back at all those tops back below the trend line is a very pure short. You know, you don't get many setups that are nicer for that, at least for the initial move back into the 76-00. But what's interesting is even though it hovered back here, once it came back into the zone where it kept on catching a bid, you know, on very aggressive move down, it couldn't get any traction once again. So right here going into the week, what I'm looking at, I'm still looking at these two pairs as globally being very choppy and very messy. I still think they're, even though they're holding heavy, I think they could still possibly surprise to the upside, even if it's just for a correction, right? And what I would say is, especially if we can't break last week's low quick, pronto into the week, do not be surprised to see this try and take a stab back into the 76s, right? If we break these lows very early on in the week, then most likely price will try and move below the 73.60s, and as long as it holds below 73.60s, you know, those 71s will come calling, will desperately be attracting as a magnet zone. But if we start to move back up on any kind of bids coming through, any covering coming through at the beginning of the week, you know, the focus is going to be that 76.00. And the big question is, you know, with all the shorts likely trying to keep the pressure on, if it takes those 76s out quick, you know, would you expect to see the sellers to be so aggressive back here? Probably not, because most likely they're all waiting in this zone, you know, 76.00 into maybe what is this? This is looking like 76 40s, 76.50s, you know. But if we start to take that whole zone out, you know, then the move to the upside could come quite quick, and then I wouldn't be surprised to see those 80s. So again, I think there are two charts which are interesting. I think there are two charts which are very, very choppy, but a lot of people asking me about it, and I didn't want it to seem as though I didn't want to really give an answer by saying it was choppy, a bit messy. So I just wanted to go through those in a bit more detail and hopefully give you some levels that make a bit more sense, okay? So I hope everybody enjoyed that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for following. Thanks for watching. As always, thanks to all the guys that like the content or share the content, retweet it. Really appreciate that. See you guys on Twitter. Have an awesome one. Take care. Bye-bye, guys.